there have been a lot of episodes of Star Wars television, including streaming service shows released, and a lot of those episodes have been great. From the Mandalore arc near the end of Season 5 of the Clone Wars to the Siege of Mandalore, culminating the Clone Wars many years later, to the final episode of Mandalorian's second season. There have been lots of great episodes, and those are some that I think will stand out above the rest. But there are a few episodes I would call the true contenders. 3 episodes that stand above the rest. Those 3 episodes are Clone Wars Season 5, Episode 20, The Wrong Jedi. This is the episode where Ahsoka walks away from the Jedi Order. If you watched my incredibly long ramble about the Clone Wars as a whole, you will know that this episode broke me. It is so perfect. And especially the final scene, as Ahsoka walks away from the Jedi Order and leaves everything behind. And we are left with that for many years. And I think that's part of why it worked so well, is that actually felt like the end of her time, the end of her story for a while. But there's also Andor Season 1, Episode 7, One Way Out, which is, in my opinion, by far the best episode of live-action Star Wars television. It is a great episode. Andy Serkis, as Gino Loy, gives a great speech, and is almost immediately overshadowed by an even better speech by Stellan Skarsgård's Luthen Rael. Plus, ends with the tragic ending of Kino being unable to swim as the rest of the prisoners escape into the water. Hello there, Future Nidsworm popping in here just to say the majority of this video is recorded before Andor Season 2 released, and, well, Andor Season 2 was very good. I dare say any of the 3 episodes showcased here. Who Are You? I forget what the Mon Mothma speech episode's called, or I also forget what the last episode's called. But episodes 8, 9, and 10 were all really brilliant, as was the rest of the series. And also arguably take the cake as the best episode of the series. But, yeah, I want to talk about the episode I'm going to talk about in a moment. Anyway, so that's the episode I'm talking about. Even though all 3 of these episodes were great, and I really should get along to doing an Andor Season 2, and Andor in general talk at some point. But I don't know when I'm going to get around to that, because there's a lot of videos I want to make right now. Honestly, part of me just wants to make a series talking about every single arc in Andor, or a series of videos talking about every single arc in Andor. I might end up doing that at some point. Probably not now, because I've got a lot of other plans. Maybe 6. And that would be 8 videos worth. Maybe. I don't know. I will do what I must. But above those, one episode stands out above the rest. The best episode of Star Wars television, in my opinion, which is, of course, The Bad Batch, Season 2, Episode 12, Outpost. This episode covers Crosshair's fall from grace within the Empire. From one of the most loyal soldiers within the Empire to someone who has turned on the Empire, murdered his superior officer, and gets tossed in prison by the end of it. And it all occurs over the course of a single day. How does that happen? Well, that's what the episode is about. How you break Crosshair. And while he was certainly a bit away from it, starting from the end of Season 1, when the Batch abandoned him, and then later in Season 2, that Episode 3 abandoned him as well. He clearly viewed both of those as a sort of abandonment by his friends. And that's what he's telling himself, even if there are doubts deeper down that they are actually doing what is right. But within just, I think it's about 22 minutes, a bit longer, because it was on Disney Plus, so they didn't weren't restricted by TV restrictions, but it's still less than 25 minutes. But within those 22 minutes, they make Crosshair's turn feel so natural and so fitting. And with his character and the story of the Bad Batch as a whole, while simultaneously making this episode work perfectly as a standalone episode that does not require any other knowledge of who these characters are at all. All three of the main characters of this episode, all three of the characters in it really, have complete character arcs which you can follow, and they establish all the important information for what those characters are thinking within the one episode. It is, simply put, perfect. And this video will now be me going through the entire episode in detail, based on the script. Excessive detail. For a single episode. After some establishing shots, the episode opens with 3 clones being forcefully retired by an Imperial officer. The retirement and replacement of the clones is an important part of the entire series, and especially this episode, as Mady and his team are unknowingly protecting the gear for the new stormtroopers, which they weren't allowed to use or even know existed, and which plays into Crosshair's fall from grace within the Empire, as he realizes that the Empire truly does not care for him or his brothers. We then get introduced to Lieutenant Nolan, who introduces himself by saying, CT-9904, you're out of uniform. Crosshair is out of uniform for nothing more than him not wearing his helmet while waiting by a shuttle. But also, by calling Crosshair CT-9904 instead of Crosshair, this instantly makes us hate Nolan, because it dehumanizes Crosshair, and we are meant to think throughout the episode and the series of the clones as people, and calling people by their numbers is very, very dehumanizing and will instantly make us hate him. But on top of that, it reminds us of Pong Krell, and if you have seen the Umbara arc of the Clone Wars, you hate Pong Krell, or at least I hope you do. and Pong Krell always referred to the clones by their numbers, because he did not see them as people, and nor does Lieutenant Nolan. By drawing the link to Pong Krell, we have been instantly made to hate Nolan here in this scene. Then later on in the scene, it gets reinforced as Nolan says, "Fantastic, more clones. I don't like used equipment." Referring to the clones again as used equipment shows that he is just further dehumanizing the clones and further reinforces our hatred of him, because the clones are people. And this episode and the series as a whole, especially this arc of the series, is about the clones being people and their replacements, and how they're being replaced and treated as less than people by the Empire. And Nolan plays his role within the arc perfectly. We then cut to the clones and Nolan descending in their shuttle to the planet where the rest of the episode will take place. And we see Nolan gripping his seatbelt bars tightly, showing that he is really not ready for this kind of mission. And later, Mayday will press him, and he will reveal this is the first time he's ever been in command of anything. Well, reveal by omission, more than actively reveal. Nolan then slips at exiting the shuttle on the ice on the ground, and when Clone tries to help him stand up properly, Nolan simply reprimands him and orders that clone to guard the ship, further reinforcing that Nolan is unprepared for this situation and that Nolan is an asshole. The group then makes their way into the base, and we get our first sighting of an ice vulture, which symbolize, well, they're vultures, they symbolize death. This outpost is dead. As we will find out soon, only 3 of the clones remain out of the whole squad of, I think there's about 10 helmets lying around on the base, shown off on the base. So at least 10 of the clones have died already, and more will die by the end of this episode. We then get introduced to the final character of the episode, Mayday, and right away we get some excellent environmental storytelling as Mayday is in bandaged together armor, clearly showing that he has been fighting for a long time and that his armor is degrading around him and he has not been able to get replacement armor. Which is of course very ironic given what he's been doing his entire time is guarding armor. Armor that he could have been using. Furthermore, when we get introduced to the rest of Mayday's squad, we see that they are, while still in beaten up and bandaged armor, their armor is a lot less beaten up and bandaged than Mayday's armor, clearly showing that Mayday has been giving them the better gear and sacrificed his own protection for the team, which is a central part of his character that he cares about his men and about his brothers above all else, and it does not matter what they're doing. They are the most important thing to him, above his own safety. And then Mayday meets Nolan. Mayday introduces himself by saying that Nolan was expected 36 rotations ago, and asks if they got lost. To which Nolan responds that we work on the Empire's schedule, not Trooper, not yours. Mayday then tries to pull rank, saying it's Commander, Lieutenant, but Nolan does not care about Mayday and his rank. He just pushes past Mayday and starts walking further into the base, criticizing as he goes. Getting exasperated with the lack of care his clone soldiers have showed to the base, ignoring the fact that there are only 3 of them, and they are clearly not in good shape, because the Empire has not been replacing their men, has not been helping them. They are trapped here with no aid. And the 3 of them are all that's left. Mayday introduces us to the other 2, Hex and Veach, warming up by a heater, saying that they are the only 3 clones left alive at the base, and all Nolan has to say to that is, your failings will be dealt with later. Clearly showing that he does not care about, that he cares about the loss of the clones, but only because it means that they have been failing their mission to properly protect this base and losing valuable equipment or tools for the Empire, which is to say, the other lives of the clones. Because yes, of course, they are just tools to him. And then Nolan puts himself in charge of the base, to which Mayday simply responds, I feel safer already. And when Nolan demands respect, Mayday responds, in my experience, respect is something to be earned. Which, while not quite something Rex has ever said to my knowledge, feels very Rex-ish. Rex's most famous line, I feel, of course, being, in my book, experience outranks everything. Both statements are talking about how you need to be trusted and proven to be worth listening to. The comparison of Mayday to Rex builds our love for Mayday, as we all love Rex. Rex is one of the most popular characters from the Clone Wars, and has made a few appearances in the Bad Batch. So connecting us to Rex will just make us like Mayday even more than we already will. And even if you don't know who Rex is, and have never encountered him, that line still shows that Mayday values very important things like earning respect and proving your own worth. You don't just get handouts in this world. But Nolan doesn't let a good opportunity to insult a clone go to waste, and in response to Mayday's line about respect being earned, he says, why did the Empire abandon you on this desolate rock where you let most of your squad die? Clearly saying that you have not earned respect and do not deserve respect. And the Empire does not respect you, and should not respect you either, because you let most of them die. Nolan does not understand what respect is and why he respects someone. And yes, the Empire does not respect him, but that does not mean he should not be respected. Nolan does not understand soldiers, really. And this is where Mayday pressures Nolan into revealing that he has never commanded a mission, basically saying, yes, the Empire only trusts me to command this rock, but at least they respected me enough to command this rock, unlike you, who they have not trusted and respected with anything. And then Mayday turns to his two remaining soldiers and sends them off to help Nolan around the base. And then we get a little back and forth between Crosshair and Mayday dishing on Nolan and building a rapport between them, ending with Mayday giving Crosshair a tour around the outpost. Interesting, looking at the subtitles for this section, the outpost has a capital T and capital O at the front of the words, which I don't know what that says, but it does. It says something, probably. And it's just an interesting fact I found when I was scripting this. And yes, this is somewhat scripted. I wouldn't blame you for not realizing that. And then finally the scene ends with a wide shot showing the helmets of all the dead clones that have been replaced as a tribute to the fallen. On their tour of the base, Mayday tells Crosshair that he's been out here for over a year, guarding the cargo, and that they just went off this rock now. Crosshair questions who's been attacking them, and Mayday tells them it's just random locals, and Crosshair questions how random locals have been able to kill most of a squad of clone troopers. Mayday knocks on one of the sensors next to them and says, well, our gear's being deteriorated by conditions, and we are just running out. The clones are clearly not even properly prepared for the winter, as they're wearing clone trooper armor, not snow clone trooper armor. Mayday then says that he requested replacements for his gear, but he has not got any, which is just very ironic when he has been spending all this time guarding gear that his team could have been using. And yet he's just been told to guard those traits with little to do but wonder what is inside them out here. It is above a clone trooper's pay grade to know what is in those traits. As Crosshair begins to look around outside the sensors, Mayday comments that the cold will kill him if he stays out too long, if the creatures in the ice don't kill him first. And then we get another ice vulture screech above before Mayday continues, either way, it will make them happy. Death is circling this episode, and death is circling those who venture outside of the perimeter. We then they get interrupted by an attack by some raiders, and we hear on the comms that Hex is down, and Crosshair gets in, so then Crosshair and Mayday run off into position. Crosshair takes up position in a tower. As he lines up a shot on one of the raiders, the shuttle that he has arrived in explodes, and Veach goes down as well. Crosshair gets blinded by the light from the explosion, but still manages to get off his shot on the fleeing raider, and he hits the raider in the leg, and then chases down that raider into the ice crevasse below, outside the base, which they will then use to travel through the ice caves to find the raider encampment later in the episode. Mayday comes and finds Crosshair in the crevasse and tells him that the raiders took off in a skiff, and he thinks that the others fled through the mountains. Crosshair reveals, looking at the blood splatter from the wounded soldier, that they actually escaped through the crevasse and through the caves. And Mayday realizes this is how they've been sneaking into and out of the base. We then cut to Mayday placing Hex and Veach's helmets with the others from his team, when Nolan barges in and demands that they go recover the two lost crates from the attack. When Mayday mentions that they don't have the manpower anymore to retrieve the crates, Nolan just says, it's not up to Mayday to determine what is valuable, and sends Crosshair off with Mayday to retrieve the crates, because those two clones are all he can spare for this mission. While looking through the caves, they come across a dead raider, and Mayday says, not sure what bothers me more, that he's wearing armor stolen off my men, but his cohorts just left him here. Which continues to reinforce to us that the most important thing to Mayday is that loyalty to your men. And that is what he cares about above all. Both that his gear was taken from his men, reducing his remaining men's ability to protect themselves and pay respects to their fallen, as well as leaving a wounded man to die. It's just so counter to how he would ever operate. You keep your men alive, you keep them with you, and you do what you can to protect them. But apparently these guys just leave them behind. Crosshair counters that by saying no point in carrying dead weight, which will be used to show how he changes later in the episode, but also shows his cold detachment he has seeing his fellow men at this point in time. Seeing himself as abandoned by the rest of the Bad Batch and not feel a proper connection with anyone else, except for maybe Cody, who also just abandoned him. Crosshair currently doesn't have any connections that he would feel the need to save left to him. Everyone has abandoned him. Why would you bother saving your quote-unquote friends? They'll just end up abandoning you later on. Mayday responds to that with, "Remind me not to die on your watch." Which, of course, Mayday will die on his watch, and Crosshair will do everything within his power to save him. But this just builds the irony of the episode up. Then, as they progress further down the cavern, Crosshair steps on a pressure mine, and Mayday says, "What was that about dead weight?" But he still tries to get Crosshair out of there, and promises to carry Crosshair's body back to the outpost if he fails to disarm it. Because Mayday cares about his friends and his brothers, and will do what it takes to keep them alive, or at the very least, pay respects to them when they die. And Mayday says that he has been forced to improvise to disarm the mines as he does not have proper tools, and all clones have been forced to improvise since the war, because the Empire does not care about them. The soldiers that won the Clone Wars for them, and now they're just tossed aside. And he mentions that he did not think about the end of the war until it was over, which is another common theme for the late era of the Clone Wars, especially the Siege of Mandalore, and the Bad Batch as a whole. The clones are not prepared to live without the war. They were bred for the war. They live for the war. They only know the war. They only know how to fight and how to die. Palpatine is, of course, taking advantage of this to just get rid of the clones, toss them aside. Nobody cares about them. They are not built into society. There is no protections for them. As Mayday works on the mine, he asks Crosshair what team he was a part of. Crosshair eventually responds with Clone Force 99, and when asked about what happened to them, he says, after a while, they are gone. Taking a pause before going on, because he's not sure how to refer to them. They are gone, but they aren't dead. And Crosshair does not want to lie to his new friend, who he's starting to build respect for, as Mayday is saving him when Mayday had no reason to save him, really. It would be much easier and safer for Mayday to just leave Crosshair alone there, and hope that he'll be able to do the mission on his own. But no, Mayday is helping him, so Crosshair does not want to lie. But he also doesn't want to say that they left the Empire, because that feels like it would almost be giving a positive spin on them. And Crosshair still does not believe the Batch has made the right decision. Mayday says that we are all that's left, the survivors. Combat troopers stuck babysitting cargo. But Crosshair says a mission is a mission. He still only really cares about doing a good job for the Empire. When Mayday finishes disarming the pressure mine, he takes some steps back because, as he says, he's confident, just not stupid. The pair of them then reach the raider base and swiftly take out all the raiders there. In the fighting, one of the raiders tries to escape the cargo, but Crosshair shoots him down, and Mayday gets swarmed, but Crosshair shoots all the raiders around him dead. The fight ends with Crosshair shooting some sort of explosive, which causes some avalanches and takes out all the remaining raiders. The two of them then make their way down to load up the cargo and discover that the precious cargo they were protecting and dying for all this while their gear degrades is more gear. As Mayday says, we've been risking our lives to recover equipment we could have been wearing this whole time. But as Crosshair points out, it is not clone trooper gear. It is not for them. It is new toys for the shiny new military, while they get the scraps. After all the clones have done, all they've sacrificed. The Empire never cared for the clones, get them out of the way, and replace them with the recruits. The clones are a remnant of the Republic. soldiers who gave them the Empire are not needed anymore. And as I believe Mayday says, we were good soldiers, we followed orders. I don't have time to talk about this line and its wider context of good soldiers follow orders line, which I believe was introduced in Clone Wars Season 6 arc, where they also introduced the inhibitor chips. This script is already getting too long, and this video is getting too long. It's kind of very tangential to the episode, but this line is perfect, and the way that Bad Batch uses it, both here and in other places, to show how the Empire is abandoning the soldiers who did nothing but follow their orders and do what was they believed to be right, and wipe out the Jedi, take out the Separatists, build the Empire, and now the Empire's abandoned them. And the Bad Batch consistently uses good soldiers follow orders line to hammer in that clones were nothing more than tools for the Empire. And it is excellent. It was the line, though, that probably requires a full video in and of itself. But then another avalanche descends down upon Mayday and Crosshair, and they both need to run away from it, and Mayday pushes Crosshair out of the way of a rock, but gets slammed into it himself by falling snow. Crosshair wakes up in the storm that surrounds them, and he immediately starts looking for Mayday, and when Mayday tells him to go and save himself, showing that Mayday is self-sacrificing, Crosshair refuses and drags Mayday all the way back to the outpost, through the mountains, through a snowstorm, ice vultures circling above. At this point, Crosshair has almost completed his arc for the episode, having found someone that he can properly trust once more, who did not abandon him, and combined with the Empire showing their hand more and more aggressively that they do not care about clones and do not care about him. He realizes at this point that the Batch was right. When they left the Empire, they were not abandoning him, he was abandoning them. He was the one in the wrong, he should have gone with them. The Empire is wrong, and staying with them was wrong. And Crosshair has now realized this, and put his face back in his brothers, but there's still one more step for Crosshair to take before he can truly have left the Empire. The next scene begins with a shuttle landing at the outpost, joining several others being loaded up by stormtroopers, while Nolan oversees them. When some of the stormtroopers see Crosshair and Mayday approaching and go investigate, with Nolan pushing past the stormtroopers, and when he sees it's just Crosshair and Mayday returning without any crates, he dismisses the stormtroopers, addresses Crosshair and the clearly wounded Mayday, simply saying, "About time you two returned." Crosshair interrupts Nolan asking for a medic, but Nolan just continues to go, "I see you didn't retrieve the crates, which means you failed your mission." Nolan continues to push Crosshair around, assuming that Crosshair is still just the loyal soldier to the Empire that he ever was. And he was at the start of the mission. However, Crosshair by this point has changed, and when push comes to shove, Crosshair is about to shove hard. But first he pushes a bit, and Nolan for aid, but Nolan simply responds, "Certainly not. That would be a waste of the Empire's resources." Because Mayday is just a resource, and one that is no longer of value to the Empire. Because he is dying and proven that he is a failure. Mayday then lets out one final cough, and Crosshair moves to comfort him, but finds that his friend is already dead. Nolan continues, "He served his purpose as a soldier of the Empire." Crosshair responds saying that Nolan could have saved him, but Nolan repeats that Mayday was expendable, as is Crosshair, before threatening to have Crosshair meet a similar fate, punctuating his threat with "clones," used in a similar way to how someone would use a slur to insult someone at the end of a sentence. Then another ice vulture flies overhead, both symbolizing the death of Mayday and the imminent death of Nolan. Crosshair's rage builds as he looks at Mayday and then looks at Nolan, who tells him to get back up while he's still useful. The Ice Vulture screeches a couple more times, and Crosshair stands up with a determined look on his face and simply says, "Lieutenant." When Nolan turns around, Crosshair shoots him straight through the chest and collapses. As the stormtroopers move to arrest Crosshair, we see the Ice Vulture one final time, and it lets out a screech before fading to black. I think the scene speaks for itself, really. It is the culmination of Crosshair's arc. As Mayday dies beside him, Crosshair, in fury at the Empire, which he was so loyally served at the beginning of this episode, shoots the representation of everything evil about the Empire and turns his back on it to join up with his brothers in the clones. And we get 3 dead, dying men at the end of it. Crosshair, of course, does live, but only because he gets rushed off to Tantis, where he'll be experimented on. This is just the perfect ending to the episode, really. Well, almost perfect, because I do have some problems with this part, and that is Mayday's death. More specifically, when Mayday dies. I feel Mayday dies too early, before any help can actually arrive. So Mayday would have died whether or not Nolan actually got help. Nolan did refuse to get help, and that is still evil, but it was ultimately pointless whether or not he did get help. I feel it would have been so much more impactful if Mayday did not die until after Nolan was shot. Have Crosshair collapse next to Mayday, like he does in the actual show, and then have Crosshair watch as Mayday dies, and just be unable to save him. It would also make Nolan referring to Mayday in the past tense, while Mayday is still alive and breathing, and Nolan is fully capable of saving him. So much more impactful, in my opinion. Mayday, it would just make us hate Nolan even more, and make Crosshair hate him even more. And it would just make, for the final moment, as Crosshair shoots Nolan in the heart, and then collapses, that much better, in my opinion. But the final scene is still great. I'd pretty much just move the bit where Crosshair finds out that Mayday's dead a few moments later, and it'd be perfect. We then get one final quick scene with Amiri Carr looking over Crosshair, which mainly serves to set up for where he will be in the future, and which is with Hemlock. As he will eventually try and escape and tell them to execute plan, I believe it was 98, which is go into hiding, we are compromised, do not try and find me, I am dead. This episode was given a very, very tall order. It was responsible for having Crosshair abandon the Empire, which he had previously shown absolute resolute conviction towards supporting. And it only had 22 minutes to do so, ish. And it took that concept and made an episode which arguably isn't even about him. You could argue that this is an episode about Mayday and Nolan, clones and the Empire. But through that, it shows us how Crosshair will fall as he moves from the Empire to the clones, and joins up with the clone troopers in the end, and sides against the Empire. Mayday reminding Crosshair of the value of camaraderie and loyalty to your squad. Meanwhile, Nolan is the worst parts of the Empire. An uncaring man just trying to cast aside the clones and won't do anything to help them, even when it would hardly cost him anything. A point about the Empire which is only amplified by the precious cargo they've been dying to protect, being armor for their replacements. This is an episode in which death is constantly circling around the episode, with the Ice Vulture circling high in almost every single outside scene, but 2/3 of the main cast die by the end, and Crosshair metaphorically dies as well, collapsing at the end of the episode, only to be revived by Miri as he leaves the Empire behind. He leaves behind CT-9904 and truly becomes Crosshair, loyal to his men, not the Empire. And as for what's coming up next, well, I hear there's a certain game out there that's received its 20th anniversary this month. This month being November. Yeah, I probably should have talked about it in November, but I didn't have time to make footage about it. But anyways, yes, Battlefront 2 came out in 2005. So to cap off the year, I will be talking all about, yeah, probably my favorite Star Wars game ever made. Obviously, I'm talking about the original one, not the crappy remake from, I think the Battlefront 2, or not remake, you know what I mean, it's from 2017. Hey, look, there's a little Kit Fisto in the background. He's DLC exclusive, you know. I always knew he was there. I didn't actually know he was in DLC until didn't even know DLC existed until the Classic Collection came out, which, by the way, is where I will be getting all my footage from, because it's the only place I can really get footage from. But, yes, Battlefront 2.